The American Nurses Association has changed its code of ethics from nurses must recognize racism as harmful assaults that negatively impact care and violate the human dignity of an individual, changed it to nurses ought to recognize racism as harmful. That and so much more in the updated 2025 Code of Ethics, and we need to talk about it. On January 29th of this year, the American Nurses Association released its updated Code of Ethics for nurses, and this is a really big deal because they only come out with a new one about every 10 years or so, okay? 1 month later, on February 28th, they emailed everyone that had purchased it 5 full pages of corrections. 5 full pages of corrections without any rationale, without any explanation whatsoever. I think they're probably hoping no one really picks up on this. And I haven't heard anyone talking about it, but we need to talk about it. Let's start with the fact that purchasing this is not cheap. It's like $50. Mind you, it's only 50 something pages. So it's like $1 a page. It's cheaper if you're a member. And then they do have an e-version as well. But a month after you finally put out your once a decade update, it's basically void because of 5 full pages of corrections. At a time when trust in the ANA is at an all-time low, this is not helping at all, okay? Clearly something happened after it was published, right? Legal got involved. Why on earth they wouldn't have been involved beforehand? It's not like this is your first time putting out a revision. Y'all been doing it since 1950, okay? But something clearly happened to warrant 5 full pages of corrections. So what happened? What happened? No rationale, no explanation, nothing. This only fosters and gives us like evidence to distrust you even more. I mean, just be transparent, you know? But the whole, like, we're just gonna send you an email and hope that no one ever notices. And I'm not seeing anyone talk about it. What about the legal implications? Okay, there's now essentially 2 versions of the Code of Ethics out there. So which one are we gonna use if we're in court, you know, as a nurse? Because like expert witnesses will cite the Code of Ethics, right? When they're testifying. This is the standard by which nurses are held and judged when we are in court. So should we use version A or version B? Are you going to officially put out a statement and like redact version A? Because all I'm seeing and hearing is crickets. Unless someone out there has come across something that I haven't seen, please let me know. A lot of the changes are pretty inconsequential. For example, changing the term professional organizations to nursing organizations. Okay. Changing nurses must take an active role in the democratic process, changing it to nurses ought to take an active role in the democratic process. Okay, you know, but some of them are problematic. Tell me why right off the bat in the preface of the Code of Ethics, it says to remove this one sentence about the code is both normative and aspirational and its values are stable, blah, 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 one sentence, and replace it with this entire paragraph that just is beating a dead horse about how the code should be interpreted as aspirational, especially provisions 9 and 10, and that aspiration signifies the pursuit of an ideal that is just beyond our present capacity, a goal that we acknowledge as nurses alone we cannot fully realize. A whole half a page so as to point out no less than 5 million times that it's just kind of like a goal, it's just aspirational. Also in the preface of the code, it talks about how language changes over time. It explains the importance of using terms like may, will, shall, ought, and must. It says, in this Code of Ethics, the term ought was deliberately used. The term should was carefully chosen. Must was specifically used. and that each term was intentionally chosen and woven into the code. So then tell me why the vast majority of these 5 full pages of edits are changing the use of those terms, like compulsory terms like must, changing it to permissive terms like ought to. They ought to. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. Let's look at provision 6.3 that is discussing nurses in leadership positions and how they have a responsibility to respond to concerns and work to resolve them in a way that preserves the integrity of nurses. And then there's a sentence that originally read, they, meaning nurse leaders, they must seek to change enculturated activities or expectations in the practice setting that are morally objectionable. That's good, right? Nursing leaders must do the right thing. But now, a month later, we're changing it to they ought to seek to change enculturated activities and expectations. Like, it's a recommendation for them to do the right thing. Let's look at provision 4.4 that originally read, nurses in an educator or preceptor role must be provided with appropriate institutional support to allow for supervision of students without compromising patient safety or well-being or incurring conflicts of commitment. So tell me why, pray tell, a month later, that changed to nurses in an educator or preceptor role have a reasonable expectation that they will be provided with appropriate institutional support to allow for supervision of students, blah, blah, blah. I'm just spitballing here. Did you maybe, perhaps, fall under some pressure from outside organizations that don't want to be held to that standard because they must, when they could just, maybe as a recommendation, do the right thing? Provision 6.1 originally read, for virtues to develop and be operative in nurses, nurses must be supported by a moral milieu that enables them to flourish. And it was changed to, for virtues to develop and be operative in nurses, nurses have a reasonable expectation that they will be supported by a moral milieu that enables them. Then there's a lot of vague changes where you can't tell, is this change to support nurses or to work against them? For example, in provision 4.4, it read, nurses must not knowingly assign or delegate nursing assessment and evaluation to any non-nurse member of the interprofessional team. Changed it to nurses should not knowingly assign or delegate nursing assessment and evaluation. And I want to go back to the first one I shared with you, which is the very first provision listed, 1.1, where it changed from nurses must recognize racism as harmful to nurses ought to recognize racism as harmful. It was not that long ago that the ANA as an organization came out publicly and apologized for its history of racism. So I cannot, for the life of me, understand why you would change this from you must recognize racism as harmful to you ought. Help me understand. So the question remains, why? And why are you so tight-lipped about it? Just be transparent with us, with the nurses in this country and with your members. Did you cave to outside pressure? Or is there a legal implication that I just don't understand because I'm not an attorney? Are you concerned about rigid standards that are going to hold groups legally liable? And if so, who are you protecting? Are you protecting nurses or admin or the ANA? I really want to understand. Help me understand, ANA. I will be doing some other videos on the Code of Ethics in general because I haven't talked about that in a really long time. Just about certain provisions and how important it is that nurses out there understand them, because whether you're a member of the ANA or not makes no difference. This is what you will be held to.